The hospital room was cold, sterile, and filled with the smell of antiseptic and grief. Nora Calloway lay broken in the bed, her body still trembling from emergency surgery, her arms aching for the baby they told her was gone. But it was the man standing over her who delivered the killing blow. Silas Thorne, her husband, the billionaire CEO who had once promised to love her forever, looked at her with eyes full of hatred. "You killed him, Nora. You killed my son." Her voice came out as a broken whisper. "Silas, please." Someone pushed me. I felt hands on my back at the top of the stairs. His laugh was cruel, hollow, a sound that made her blood run cold. My mother saw everything. "You were told to stay in bed, but you couldn't listen. You were too stubborn, too reckless. And now my son is dead because of you." Nora reached for him with trembling fingers, desperate for any trace of the man who had once held her like she was precious. "I would never hurt our baby. You know me. You know I would die before I let anything happen to him." Silas stepped back, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. "I thought I knew you. But my mother was right all along. You were never strong enough for this family." Behind him, Beatrice Thorne stood perfectly still, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her face arranged in an expression of practiced sympathy. But Nora saw it, just for a flicker of a second, the satisfaction in those cold blue eyes. "I'm so sorry, dear." Beatrice's voice was soft, venomous. Some women simply aren't built for motherhood. It's tragic, but it's the truth. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? Have you ever watched the person who promised to love you forever turn into the one who destroys you? Stay with me, because what happens next will show you that truth doesn't just surface. It vindicates. If you believe in justice, hit that like button right now and join the KBR romance family, because you won't want to miss a single second of this story. Nora's entire world was collapsing, but this moment, this accusation, was just the beginning of a nightmare that would last 7 years. A nightmare that would end with a billionaire on his knees, and a truth so devastating, it would make headlines around the world. But to understand how deep this betrayal ran, you need to know where it all started. Nora Calloway had never known what it meant to belong. She grew up in Chicago's foster care system, a world where children were rotated through homes like inventory, where love was conditional and survival required learning to be invisible. By the time she was 16, Nora had lived in 11 different houses with 11 different sets of rules and 11 different reasons why she wasn't quite good enough to keep. Some families took her in for the monthly check. Others wanted to feel charitable without the inconvenience of actual attachment. And a very few, were genuinely kind but too overwhelmed by their own struggles to give her what she needed. Nora learned early that the only person she could rely on was herself. But she had something that no amount of rejection could take away. She had vision. While other kids dreamed of escape, Nora dreamed of creation. She would sketch dresses on the margins of her schoolwork, imagining fabrics and cuts and the way a perfectly tailored garment could make someone feel powerful, seen, worthy. She rescued discarded clothing from donation bins and transformed them with needle and thread into something new, something beautiful. Fashion wasn't just a hobby. It was her survival mechanism, her proof that broken things could be remade into something valuable. When Nora aged out of the foster system at 18, she had nothing but a high school diploma, a garbage bag full of clothes, and a portfolio of sketches she had protected more carefully than anything else in her life. She applied to design schools knowing she could never afford them, knowing the odds were impossibly stacked against a girl with no family and no money. But she applied anyway, because giving up felt like dying. And somehow, impossibly, she got a full scholarship to the Fashion Institute in New York. For the first time in her life, Nora allowed herself to hope. She worked 3 jobs while maintaining a perfect grade point average. She cleaned office buildings at night, waited tables on weekends, and did freelance alterations whenever she could find clients. She survived on 4 hours of sleep, black coffee, and the unshakable belief that if she worked hard enough, if she proved herself valuable enough, she could build a life that no one could take away from her. Her professors called her talented. Her classmates called her obsessed. Nora called it necessary, because she knew something that privileged people never understood. When you come from nothing, you can't afford to give anything less than everything. By 24, she had graduated top of her class and landed a junior design position at ArcLight Fashion House, one of New York's most prestigious labels. It was entry-level work, fetching coffee, organizing fabric swatches, watching more experienced designers take credit for her ideas. But she was inside the world she had dreamed about, and she was determined to climb. She had no idea that everything was about to change at a charity gala she had no business attending. The event was for New York's elite, the kind of people who spent more on a single outfit than Nora earned in 6 months. She was only there because her supervisor had food poisoning, and someone needed to represent Arclight. Nora had borrowed a dress from the sample room, altered it to fit her slender frame perfectly, and walked into that ballroom feeling like an imposter waiting to be discovered. That was when she saw him. Silas Thorne was impossible to miss. At 32, he was already the CEO of Thorne Global Enterprises, a tech and real estate empire worth $12 billion. He was tall, commanding, with dark hair that curled slightly at the temples and gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything and everyone in the room. Women circled him like planets around a sun, each one hoping to catch his attention, each one beautiful and polished and exactly the kind of woman who belonged in his world. Nora had no intention of joining them. She positioned herself near the bar, nursing a glass of champagne she couldn't actually afford to replace if she spilled it, scanning the room for potential professional contacts. She didn't notice Silas approaching until his voice cut through her concentration. "You look like you're planning a heist." Nora turned to find those gray eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "Excuse me, everyone else here is trying to be seen." He gestured at the preening crowds around them. "But you're watching them like you're cataloging their weaknesses. It's either very strategic or very suspicious." She should have been intimidated. She should have stammered some polite excuse and melted into the background where she belonged. But something about his directness unlocked something equally direct in her. "Maybe I'm just trying to figure out who's worth talking to." "And what have you concluded?" "That most of the people here care more about being important than being interesting." Silas laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features into something almost approachable. "That might be the most honest thing anyone has said to me all year. I'm Silas. I know who you are." She paused. "I'm Nora. And what do you do, Nora, when you're not analyzing charity galas?" "I design clothes. Or I will, eventually. Right now, I mostly organize other people's sketches and pretend I'm learning something valuable." He studied her with new interest, his gaze moving over her dress in a way that felt analytical rather than predatory. "You made that dress, didn't you? What makes you think that?" "Because it doesn't fit like something off a rack. It fits like something constructed for exactly your body. And there's a confidence in the tailoring that doesn't match the uncertainty in your eyes." Nora felt heat rise to her cheeks. Most people didn't look that closely. Most people saw a pretty girl in a nice dress and moved on. But Silas Thorne saw the stitches, the choices, the hours of work that went into creating something beautiful. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. "You're very observant. I built a company by noticing what other people miss." He stepped closer. "Have dinner with me." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. It was an invitation delivered with the confidence of someone who rarely heard the word no. "Why?" "Because I have a feeling you're someone worth knowing, Nora. And I don't like missing opportunities." She should have said no. She should have remembered that men like Silas Thorne didn't date women like her, at least not seriously. She should have protected herself from the inevitable heartbreak of reaching for something so far above her station. But Nora had spent her whole life being careful, being invisible, being safe. And something about the way Silas looked at her, like she was the most interesting person in the room, made her want to be reckless. "All right, but I choose the restaurant." His grin was devastating. "I would expect nothing less." Their first date was at a tiny Italian place in Brooklyn that Nora loved because the owner reminded her of one of her few kind foster mothers. Silas arrived in a car that cost more than the entire building, wearing a suit that probably came from the same designers Nora worked for. He looked completely out of place among the checkered tablecloths and dripping candles. And he loved every second of it. "This is incredible." He twirled spaghetti with genuine enthusiasm. "I can't remember the last time I ate somewhere without a 3-month reservation list and a dress code." "Is that a complaint?" "It's a revelation." He looked at her across the flickering candlelight. "You're a revelation, Nora. You don't know anything about me. I know you work 3 jobs to afford an apartment in a neighborhood most people would be afraid to walk through. I know you send money back to a foster brother in Chicago, even though you can barely pay your own bills. I know you stay late at work every night, learning everything you can from designers who don't appreciate you." Nora set down her fork carefully. "You had me investigated. I always research potential investments." His eyes never left hers. "And you, Nora Calloway, are someone I want to invest in." That should have felt invasive. It should have triggered every defense mechanism she had built over a lifetime of learning not to trust. But Silas said it with such matter-of-fact certainty that it almost sounded like a compliment. Most people would find that creepy. Most people aren't you. And what kind of person am I? Silas leaned forward, his voice dropping. You're the kind of person who doesn't need my money or my connections or my name. You're building something yourself, brick by brick, and nothing is going to stop you. I find that incredibly attractive. So, this is about attraction? This is about recognition. He reached across the table to take her hand. I've never met anyone like you, Nora. And I've met a lot of people. Nora looked at their intertwined fingers, his skin tan against her deeper brown, his manicured nails so different from her work-worn hands. Everything about them screamed incompatibility. Different worlds, different backgrounds, different futures. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she had never seen before. She saw belief. Your family isn't going to approve. She said it quietly. A foster kid from Chicago isn't exactly the pedigree they're looking for. My family doesn't get to choose who I love. Love. The word hung between them like a promise neither of them was ready to examine too closely. It's a little early for that word, isn't it? Silas smiled. Some things you just know. And against every instinct screaming at her to protect herself, Nora decided to stay. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Fancy restaurants followed by late-night pizza in her tiny apartment. Gallery openings followed by long walks through Central Park where they talked about everything and nothing. Silas introduced her to a world of luxury she had only dreamed about, while she reminded him of a simplicity he had forgotten existed. But it wasn't all romance and stolen kisses. The first time Nora met Cordelia Beatrice Thorne, she understood exactly what she was up against. Beatrice was everything Nora was not. Old money pedigree, perfect posture, a smile that never reached her ice-blue eyes. She received Nora in the formal sitting room of the Thorne estate like a queen granting audience to a peasant, gesturing to a chair that felt designed to make visitors feel small. So, Beatrice's gaze swept over Nora with barely concealed disgust. You're the girl my son has become so infatuated with. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Thorne. Nora kept her voice steady, even as her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Is it? Beatrice took a delicate sip of tea. I imagine this must all be quite overwhelming for someone of your background. My background. The foster homes, the poverty, the complete lack of family or breeding. Beatrice set down her cup with precision. I've done my research as well, Miss Calloway. I know exactly who you are. Then you know I've worked hard for everything I have. Yes, that's precisely what concerns me. Beatrice leaned forward slightly. Women who have worked hard for everything often feel entitled to take shortcuts when an easier path presents itself. My son is a very wealthy man, a very trusting man. I will not see him exploited by someone looking for a way out of their circumstances. I'm not with Silas for his money, perhaps not consciously. But tell me, when exactly did you fall in love with my son? Before or after you learned about his net worth? Does it matter? It matters a great deal. Beatrice's smile was the most terrifying thing Nora had ever seen. Because I know how these stories end. The poor girl convinces herself she loves the prince, only to discover what she really loved was the castle. The marriage crumbles when she realizes money can't fix whatever broke inside her long ago. You don't know me. I know your type. Beatrice stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Enjoy this while it lasts, Miss Calloway. Eventually Silas will come to his senses. And when he does, I'll be here to help him clean up the mess you leave behind. That evening, Nora almost ended things. She sat in Silas's car outside her apartment building, tears streaming down her face, trying to find the words to set him free from a future his family would never accept. But Silas saw her tears and didn't flinch. What did she say to you? It doesn't matter. She wiped her eyes angrily. Your mother is right. This is never going to work. I don't belong in your world. My world. He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. My world is wherever you are. My mother has been trying to control my life since I was born. She doesn't get to choose my wife. Wife. Nora's heart stuttered. We've only been together 3 months. I knew I wanted to marry you after 3 hours. He kissed her forehead gently. I'm not asking yet. I know you need time. But I want you to understand something, Nora. There is nothing my mother can say or do that will change how I feel about you. Nothing. She's going to make my life miserable. Probably. His smile was rueful. But I'll be right there beside you. And together we can handle anything." Nora wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love was enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. So she chose to stay. 6 months later, Silas proposed. He did it on the rooftop garden of his penthouse, surrounded by candles and string lights, and the glittering Manhattan skyline spread out like a promise. He got down on one knee with a ring that probably cost more than Nora's entire life savings and asked her to be his wife with tears in his eyes. "Nora Calloway, I know our worlds are different. I know my family has made this harder than it should be. But you are the most remarkable person I have ever met. You make me want to be better. You make me believe in things I thought I was too cynical to feel. Will you marry me?" She said yes. The wedding was a fairy tale spectacle that made headlines across the country. The Billionaire and the Orphan, they called it. A modern Cinderella story. Nora wore a dress she had designed herself, a flowing creation of silk and lace that made her feel like the person she had always dreamed of becoming. Silas looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Beatrice sat in the front row with a smile that never reached her eyes, and as Nora walked down the aisle toward the man she loved, she allowed herself to believe that the worst was behind them. That Beatrice's disapproval was just a hurdle they had cleared. That nothing could touch the perfect life they were building together. She had no idea that her mother-in-law was already planning her destruction. The Thorne estate was a monument to old money and older traditions. 27 rooms spread across 3 floors. An army of staff who moved through the halls like ghosts. Priceless artwork that Nora was terrified to walk past. It should have been a dream come true for a girl who had grown up sharing cramped bedrooms with rotating foster siblings. Instead, it felt like a gilded prison. Beatrice had moved back into the estate shortly after the wedding, claiming she wanted to help the newlyweds adjust to married life. In reality, she wanted to monitor Nora's every move. "You really shouldn't rearrange the furniture, dear," Beatrice would say with that poisonous smile. "This room has been arranged exactly this way for 3 generations." Or when Nora tried to cook dinner for Silas herself. "We have staff for that, you know. There's no need to pretend you're still in that little apartment of yours." Every comment was a reminder that Nora didn't belong. Every raised eyebrow was a judgment of her worthiness. And slowly, imperceptibly, the estate that should have been her home began to feel like enemy territory. Silas tried to shield her. He defended Nora at dinners, redirected Beatrice's criticism, reminded her constantly that she was exactly where she belonged. But he was also building an empire, working 16-hour days to expand Thorne Global into new markets. He couldn't be there every moment. And in the moments he was gone, Beatrice struck. "I was having tea with the Ashworth family yesterday," Beatrice mentioned casually one evening when Silas was in London on business. Patricia was saying how relieved she was that she didn't have to train her daughter-in-law on proper etiquette. Apparently breeding shows. Nora gripped her fork until her knuckles turned white. "Is there something specific you'd like me to do differently, Beatrice?" "Oh, nothing specific. Just everything." Beatrice's laugh was like broken glass. "But don't worry, dear. We all know why Silas really married you. I'm sure you'll figure out the rest eventually." "And what exactly do you think Silas married me for?" Beatrice's eyes dropped pointedly to Nora's flat stomach. "Well, certainly not for your sparkling conversation. Now, shall we discuss the guest list for the spring gala?" The message was clear. Nora's only value was as a vessel for the next Thorne heir. Nothing else about her mattered. Not her talent, not her intelligence, not her love for Silas. But despite Beatrice's cruelty, despite the isolation, despite the constant pressure to prove herself worthy, Nora held on. She held on because of the way Silas looked at her when he came home exhausted. She held on because of the dreams they whispered to each other in the dark. She held on because giving up would prove Beatrice right. And then, 18 months into her marriage, everything changed. Nora stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Then she stared at the second one. Then the third. Pregnant. After months of trying, months of temperature charts and doctor's appointments and quiet disappointment, she was finally pregnant. She surprised Silas with the news by hiding the tests in a gift box and presenting them to him at dinner. His reaction was everything she had hoped for and more. Tears streaming down his face. Arms wrapped around her so tightly she could barely breathe. Promises whispered against her hair. "I love you so much." He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes shining. "I'm going to be the best father. I'm going to give our child everything. Our child is already lucky." Nora touched his face gently. "Because they're going to have you." The first ultrasound revealed something unexpected. "Congratulations. The doctor pointed at the monitor with a warm smile. "You're having twins." Silas laughed out loud, a sound of pure joy that filled the examination room. He kissed Nora's forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Twins, of course. You overachieve at everything." Nora couldn't stop staring at the screen. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny lives growing inside her. 2 chances to give children the family she never had. For the first time since moving into the Thorne estate, she felt truly happy. Even Beatrice seemed to soften at the news of twins. She offered to help plan the nursery, to host a baby shower with all the right society families, to connect Nora with the best obstetricians in the city. It was almost suspicious how accommodating she became. But Nora was too happy to question it, too excited about the future to notice the calculation behind Beatrice's newfound warmth. They chose names. Julian for the boy, after Silas's grandfather. Elise for the girl, because Nora had always loved the name and Silas agreed immediately. They decorated the nursery in soft greens and yellows, gender-neutral but warm and welcoming. They bought matching cribs and tiny clothes and stuffed animals that made Nora cry every time she looked at them. This was what she had wanted her whole life. A family. A real family that could never be taken away from her. She should have known that wanting something that badly made it vulnerable. Complications began in the 3rd trimester. Preeclampsia, the doctors called it. Dangerously high blood pressure that threatened both Nora and the babies. She was put on strict bed rest, confined to the master suite with orders not to exert herself under any circumstances. Silas was terrified. He wanted to cancel his business trips, to be with her every moment. But Nora insisted he go. The company needed him. Their future security depended on the deals he was closing. She would be fine. She had the staff. She had the doctors. And she had Beatrice, who swooped in with offers of help that Nora was too tired and too scared to refuse. "I've hired a nurse to look after you," Beatrice announced one afternoon, leading a thin, sharp-featured woman into Nora's bedroom. "Martha has excellent references. She'll make sure you follow all the doctor's orders." Martha smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thorne. I'll take very good care of you." Something about the nurse made Nora uneasy. There was a coldness to her efficiency, a distance in her interactions that went beyond professional detachment. But Nora was exhausted from carrying twins, terrified of losing them, and desperate for any help she could get. So she didn't question Martha's presence. She didn't notice the private conversations between the nurse and her mother-in-law. She didn't see the way Martha's eyes constantly monitored her movements, cataloging her habits and routines. She was too focused on keeping her babies alive to realize that someone was planning to take them from her. Silas called every night from Singapore, where he was finalizing a major acquisition. "How are you feeling, my love?" "Huge." She laughed weakly. "These babies are running out of room in here. Just a few more weeks. I'll be home before you know it. I miss you. I miss you too, more than you know." A pause. "Is my mother behaving herself?" Nora glanced at the door, making sure no one was listening. "She's actually being helpful. It's a little unnerving. Maybe she's coming around." Maybe. Nora wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that Beatrice had finally accepted her, that the birth of her grandchildren had softened the older woman's heart. She would learn soon enough how wrong she was. The night everything fell apart began like any other night of her bed rest. Silas was still in Singapore, scheduled to return in 2 days. Martha had given her the evening medication and retired to her room down the hall. The house was quiet, except for the usual creaks of an old estate settling into darkness. Nora couldn't sleep. The babies were restless, kicking and squirming as if they sensed something she couldn't. She lay awake, staring at the elaborate ceiling moldings, counting them over and over, trying to will herself into relaxation. That was when she heard it, a small sound from downstairs, like someone moving through the house who didn't want to be heard. Probably just staff, she told herself. This house was never truly empty. But something felt wrong. Something prickled at the back of her neck, an instinct honed from years of learning to read dangerous situations in foster homes where survival depended on awareness. She pushed herself up from the bed slowly, moving carefully because the babies had dropped low and every motion sent pressure through her pelvis. Her feet found slippers on the floor. Her hand found the wall for support. She should have called for Martha. She should have stayed in bed and pressed the intercom button that connected to the staff quarters. But the sound had seemed to come from the direction of the nursery, and some primal maternal instinct propelled her toward it. The hallway was dark except for the dim glow of night lights placed at intervals for safety. Nora made her way toward the grand staircase, one hand on the railing, the other pressed against her swollen belly. She never heard Martha come up behind her. All she felt were hands on her back. Firm hands that pushed with surprising force. And then she was falling. The world became a tumbling chaos of shadows and pain. She tried to protect her stomach, tried to curl around her babies, but gravity was merciless. She hit the landing halfway down, then kept falling, her body crashing against the ornate marble staircase until she finally came to rest at the bottom. The pain was unimaginable. But worse than the pain was the terrible sensation happening inside her body. Something rupturing. Something fundamentally wrong. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Martha's voice, calm and clinical, already on the phone with emergency services. I found her at the bottom of the stairs. It looks like she fell. No, she was supposed to be on bed rest. Yes, I'll stay with her until the ambulance arrives. Nora tried to scream. I didn't fall. You pushed me, but no sound came out, and as consciousness slipped away, she felt her babies, her precious babies, being torn away from her. She woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic. For one brief merciful moment, she didn't remember what had happened. She was just a woman waking up in an unfamiliar place, confused and disoriented. Then memory crashed back. Her hands flew to her stomach. It was flat. No. The word tore from her throat as raw terror flooded her system. No, no, no. She clawed at the hospital gown, searching desperately for any sign of the life that had been growing inside her. But there was nothing. Just emptiness where 2 heartbeats should have been. My babies. Her voice rose to a scream. Where are my babies? A nurse rushed in, followed by a doctor, both trying to calm her down with words like sedation and trauma and need to rest. But Nora couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. And then Silas was there. He stood in the doorway, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. His suit was rumpled from the emergency flight home. His face was gray and haggard. His eyes held something Nora had never seen before. Hatred. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath you, if you've ever had someone you love look at you like you're a stranger, stay with me. Because what happens next will break you before it rebuilds you. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is just beginning. Where are my babies? Nora reached for him, desperate for comfort, for reassurance, for the man who had promised to stand beside her through anything. He didn't move. They're dead. His voice was flat, emotionless, both of them. Because of you. What? No, that's not possible. Someone pushed me, Silas. I felt hands on my back. Helena saw the whole thing. His laugh was hollow and terrible. She said you were out of bed when you should have been resting. She said you lost your balance at the top of the stairs. She said you fell. That's not what happened. Nora was crying now, great heaving sobs that hurt her battered body. She pushed me. Martha pushed me down the stairs. Stop. The word cracked through the room like a whip. Stop lying. I'm not lying. Please, Silas. You have to believe me. He finally moved then, stepping closer to the bed until he was looming over her. But instead of comfort, his proximity brought only menace. Believe you. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word designed to wound. I'm supposed to believe that my mother's nurse, a woman with impeccable credentials, decided to murder my unborn children for no reason. I'm supposed to believe that you had nothing to do with your own fall when multiple people warned you to stay in bed. I was going to check on the nursery. I heard a sound. You shouldn't have been out of bed at all. So I deserve to fall? I deserve to lose our babies? Something in Silas's face flickered. Pain, maybe. Or doubt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that terrible cold anger. My mother warned me about you from the beginning. She said you would find a way to destroy everything. I should have listened. Your mother? Nora grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Your mother has hated me from the moment we met. She's been trying to get rid of me since our wedding. Did it ever occur to you that maybe she... Don't. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Don't you dare try to blame this on my mother. She's the only one who's been honest with me this entire time. Marcus, please. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow about the divorce. He pulled his arm free of her grip. I want you out of my house by the end of the week. Divorce? The word barely made sense. What else would I do? Stay married to the woman who killed my children? I didn't kill them. Nora's voice broke on the words. I loved them. I wanted them more than anything in this world. Then you should have stayed in bed like the doctors ordered. He turned toward the door. You should have put their lives above your own stubbornness for once. Silas. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her entire body. Silas, don't leave me. Please. I love you. I need you. He paused at the door, his back to her. I needed you too. His voice was barely audible. I needed you to be the mother of my children. And you failed. Then he was gone. And Nora was left alone with the wreckage of everything she had ever wanted. If this story is hitting you in the chest, if you know what it feels like to be abandoned when you needed someone most, comment survivor below. Share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And make sure you're subscribed to the KBR Romance family, because Nora's story is far from over. The memorial service was held 3 days later. Nora should not have attended. The doctors told her she needed rest, that her body was still recovering from the trauma of the fall and the emergency surgery that had tried and failed to save her babies. But she couldn't stay away. These were her children being mourned. She had a right to be there. She had no idea that Beatrice had planned her public execution. The church was filled with society's elite, all dressed in appropriately somber black, all whispering behind gloved hands as Nora took her place in a pew at the back. She could feel their eyes on her. She could hear fragments of their conversations. That's her, the one who, I heard she was out of bed when she should have been. Some people are just not meant to be mothers. Nora kept her eyes forward, fixed on the 2 tiny caskets at the front of the church. Julian and Elise. Her babies. Babies she had felt kick inside her just days ago. Babies she had sung to and dreamed about and loved with every fiber of her being. Gone, because someone pushed her down a flight of stairs. Silas delivered the eulogy. He stood at the pulpit looking devastated and handsome, every inch the grieving father. The audience hung on his every word as he spoke about hopes and dreams and the future that had been stolen from him. I thought I had found my perfect partner. His voice cracked with emotion. I thought I had found someone who would put family above everything else. He paused, his eyes finding Nora's across the congregation. I was wrong. Gasps rippled through the church. My children died because their mother was too stubborn to follow medical advice. His words landed like blows. They died because she cared more about her own desires than their safety. They died because I trusted the wrong person. The whispers intensified. Every eye in the church turned to Nora with judgment and disgust. She wanted to stand up and scream the truth. She wanted to tell everyone that she had been pushed, that Martha and Beatrice had conspired against her, that she would have died herself before ever hurting her babies. But who would believe her? The foster child with no family against the word of the Thorne dynasty. The outsider who had never belonged against the pillars of society. The woman already convicted in the court of public opinion. So she sat in silence as Silas finished his speech. She sat in silence as mourner after mourner approached him with condolences, carefully avoiding any eye contact with her. She sat in silence as her reputation was destroyed in front of everyone who mattered. And then security approached her pew. Mrs. Thorne, one of them said quietly. Mr. Thorne has asked us to escort you out. I have a right to be here. These are my children. Ma'am, please don't make a scene. Nora looked around the church. Beatrice sat in the front pew, her face appropriately sorrowful. But there was something in her eyes, something that looked like triumph. In that moment, Nora understood everything. This had been planned from the beginning. The nurse, the fall, the accusations, the memorial, all of it designed to destroy her, to remove her from Silas's life, to ensure that Beatrice would never have to share her son with an unworthy outsider. And it had worked perfectly. Nora stood on shaking legs. She allowed security to guide her toward the exit, keeping her head high even as tears streamed down her face. She would not give Beatrice the satisfaction of seeing her break. But as she passed through the church doors, she heard one final whisper that shattered whatever composure she had left. Good riddance. At least now Silas can find someone who deserves him. The divorce papers arrived by courier 2 days later. Nora read them in the tiny hotel room she could barely afford, having been locked out of the estate the moment the memorial service ended. The grounds for divorce were clearly stated in cold legal language. Negligence resulting in fetal death, failure to comply with medical supervision, irretrievable breakdown of marriage. They made her sound like a criminal, like a monster who had deliberately killed her own children. She signed them anyway, because what else could she do? Silas's lawyers had made it clear that contesting the divorce would only prolong her suffering, that the full resources of the Thorne family would be used to destroy whatever was left of her reputation, that she would never work in fashion again, would never recover from the scandal, would never escape the shadow of what she had supposedly done. Take the settlement, they advised. Disappear. Start over somewhere else. But Nora refused the money. She refused to take a single cent from the man who had destroyed her. She refused to give Beatrice the satisfaction of seeing her bought off like a problem to be solved. She walked away with nothing except the clothes on her back and a heart full of scars. The first night, she slept on a bench in Central Park because she couldn't afford a hotel room once her credit cards were canceled. The second night, a police officer took pity on her and directed her to a women's shelter where she could get a bed and a hot meal. The third night, she lay awake in that shelter, surrounded by other broken women, and made herself a promise. She would survive this. She would rebuild. She would become someone that Silas Thorne and his poisonous mother could never touch again. And maybe, someday, she would find a way to prove the truth. She had no idea that the truth was even more devastating than she could have imagined. That somewhere far away, 2 tiny hearts were still beating. That the babies she mourned every single day were alive and growing and waiting for the mother who thought she had lost them forever. But that revelation was still years away. For now, Nora had only one thing to focus on: survival. The shelter smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Nora lay on a cot that was too short for her 5'7" frame, listening to the sounds of women crying in their sleep, coughing, praying to gods who seemed to have stopped listening. She pressed her hand against her flat stomach where 2 lives had once grown. The physical pain from the fall had started to fade, but the emptiness inside her was a wound that would never fully heal. Julian, Elise, their names were a constant whisper in her mind. A woman in the cot next to her rolled over, her face lined with years of hardship. First time here? Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. It gets easier. The woman's smile was kind, despite missing teeth. Whatever brought you here doesn't have to be your ending. What if it feels like an ending? Then you make it a beginning instead. The woman closed her eyes. I've been where you are. Rock bottom. Thought I'd never climb back up. But I did. You will too. Nora wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that someone like her, with no money and no support and a reputation destroyed beyond repair, could somehow find a way forward. But in that moment, lying in a shelter bed with nothing to her name, it felt impossible. The next morning, Nora walked into a public library and did something she hadn't done in years. She asked for help. The librarian was a middle-aged black woman with warm eyes and sensible shoes. She listened as Nora explained her situation in carefully vague terms. Recently separated, no access to funds, trying to get back on her feet. The librarian didn't ask questions. She simply pulled out a folder. These are resources for women in transition. Job training programs, resume workshops, housing assistance. She handed the folder to Nora. And this computer station is available for public use. You can apply for positions online. Thank you, Nora whispered. We all need help sometimes, honey. The librarian touched her hand gently. There's no shame in starting over. For the next 3 months, that library became Nora's office. She arrived when it opened and stayed until closing, applying for jobs, rebuilding her portfolio, researching fashion design opportunities that didn't require connections or references from her previous life. She took a part-time job at a coffee shop, standing on her feet for 8-hour shifts, serving customers who never looked her in the eye. She rented a studio apartment in a building where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought at all hours. She ate ramen noodles and day-old bread. She counted every penny. And slowly, painfully, she started to rebuild. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Nora had maintained a secret online portfolio during her marriage, sketches and designs she created late at night when Silas was working and Beatrice was asleep. She had never shown them to anyone. They were just her escape, her way of maintaining her identity in a world that wanted to erase her. But now, desperate for any opportunity, she posted them to a small fashion forum under a pseudonym. Within 24 hours, she had messages from 3 emerging designers asking if she would be interested in freelance work. It wasn't much. Sketching patterns for independent labels, creating technical drawings for small boutiques, work that paid barely above minimum wage. But it was fashion. It was the thing she loved. and it was hers. Over the next 2 years, Nora built a reputation in the underground fashion scene. She worked with designers who couldn't afford big names. She created collections for brands that valued talent over pedigree. She slowly, methodically, created a new identity separate from the scandal that had destroyed her old one. She changed her name legally. Nora Calloway became Nora Marrow. New last name, new beginning. She moved to a better apartment, then a better one after that. She hired an assistant. Then two, she rented studio space in Brooklyn where young designers gathered to collaborate and create. And she never, ever spoke about Silas Thorne or the twins she had lost. Anyone who asked about her past got the same vague answer. I prefer to focus on the future. By year 5, she had launched her own label. Marrow and Gold. Elegant, affordable fashion for women who wanted to feel powerful without breaking the bank. The fashion press called her a mystery, an enigma, a designer who appeared from nowhere with a fully formed vision and undeniable talent. If they had looked closer, if they had connected the dots between dates and details and design aesthetics, they might have recognized her as Silas Thorne's disgraced ex-wife. But Nora had changed. She carried herself differently. She dressed differently. She had transformed herself so completely that the broken girl from 7 years ago no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had survived the unsurvivable. By year 6, Marrow and Gold was being carried in boutiques across the country. Nora's net worth had climbed into the millions. She had been featured in Vogue, Forbes, Harper's Bazaar. She had speaking engagements and brand partnerships and opportunities she would have killed for in her younger days. She had everything except the one thing that mattered. Every year on June 12th, the date Silas claimed their son and daughter died, Nora visited a small cemetery outside the city where 2 empty caskets had been buried. She brought white roses. She sat by the headstones that read Julian Thorne and Elise Thorne. She talked to the children she believed were resting beneath the earth. I hope you're proud of me. She traced their names with her fingers. I hope wherever you are, you know how much I loved you, how much I still love you. The grief never lessened. It just became part of who she was, a permanent ache that she carried alongside her success and her strength. She dated occasionally, men who were interested in the powerful designer but never got close enough to see the scars. She went to charity galas and fashion weeks and industry events. She smiled for cameras and gave interviews about empowerment and resilience, but she never let anyone truly in, because the last person she had loved completely had destroyed her, and she would never give anyone that power again. 7 years after the worst night of her life, Nora stood in her corner office overlooking Manhattan and allowed herself to feel something close to contentment. She had survived. She had rebuilt. She had proven that Beatrice Thorne had failed to destroy her. And then her assistant buzzed through on the intercom. Miss Marrow, a package just arrived. No return address. Should I open it? Nora glanced at her calendar. She wasn't expecting anything. Bring it to me. The assistant appeared moments later carrying a padded envelope. Plain. Anonymous. Nora dismissed her with a nod and waited until the door closed before opening it. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photo showed a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing in front of a Swiss chalet. Mountains in the background. Snow on the ground. The child wore a thick sweater and had a gap-toothed smile. He had Silas's sharp jawline. He had Nora's warm brown eyes. Nora's hands began to shake so violently she nearly dropped the photograph. The note was brief, written in shaky handwriting. Your son didn't die. He was sold. If you want the truth, meet me at Pier 9 tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone. Nora read it 3 times. Then she read it again. Your son didn't die. It wasn't possible. She had signed death certificates. She had attended a funeral. She had visited a grave for 7 years. But the boy in the photograph, she looked at the image again, her vision blurring with tears. The shape of his face, the set of his eyes, the way he tilted his head slightly to the left, just like she did when she was thinking. This couldn't be real. It had to be some cruel trick, some nightmare designed to break her all over again. But what if it wasn't? What if her son was alive? Nora arrived at Pier 9 at 7:45, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. The pier was dark, industrial, mostly abandoned this time of night. Water lapped against the pilings. A cold wind cut through her coat. She pulled it tighter and waited, every nerve ending on high alert. At 8 o'clock exactly, a woman emerged from the shadows. She was in her mid-50s, thin, nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to appear at any moment. "You're Nora Calloway." It wasn't a question. "I'm Nora Marrow now." Nora kept her voice steady even though her entire body was shaking. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, and the pier light illuminated her face. Nora's blood turned to ice. "Martha, the nurse who had been in the Thorne estate. The nurse who had pushed her down the stairs. The nurse who had watched her world burn and said nothing. You." Nora's voice came out as a whisper. "You're the one who... I was paid $5 million by Beatrice Thorne to induce your labor the night of your fall and falsify the medical records." Martha spoke quickly, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "The baby didn't die. He was delivered alive via emergency C-section. Beatrice had a private medical team waiting. They took him immediately." Nora felt her knees buckle. She grabbed the pier railing to stay upright. "Where is he?" "Switzerland. Beatrice arranged a private adoption through a family she had connections with. The Aubreys. Wealthy, discreet, no questions asked. She told them the mother died in childbirth and the father relinquished his rights. And Silas? He has no idea." Martha's face was drawn, haunted. "Beatrice showed him falsified death certificates, autopsy reports, all of it fake. She wanted you gone, and she knew the only way to make Silas turn on you was to make him believe you killed his son." Nora pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to contain the sobs threatening to tear out of her. My baby has been alive all this time." "Yes. Why are you telling me this now?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. And I can't go to my grave with this on my conscience." She pulled out a second envelope, thicker than the first. "This has everything. Medical records, wire transfers, photos of the Aubrey family, documents proving the adoption was fraudulent. I kept copies. Insurance in case Beatrice ever turned on me." Nora took the envelope with trembling hands. "Is there more?" Martha hesitated. Her face went even paler. "There's one more thing you need to know." Nora braced herself. "You weren't pregnant with just one baby. The world stopped." "What?" "You were carrying twins. A boy and a girl." Nora couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. Beatrice sold the boy to the Aubreys, but she kept the girl. Where? Boarding school. Connecticut. Elite. False identity. Martha's voice was barely audible now. Beatrice kept her close, but hidden. Leverage, in case she ever needed to control Silas. Nora felt reality tilting, fracturing, rearranging itself into something unrecognizable. Both of them. Both of my children are alive. Yes, and Beatrice has known. This entire time. Yes. Nora looked out at the dark water, her mind racing through 7 years of grief, 7 years of believing she had lost everything, 7 years of rebuilding herself from ashes. All of it built on a lie. All of it orchestrated by a woman who thought she had the right to play God. Where in Connecticut? Martha gave her the name of the school, the false identity Beatrice had created for the little girl. What's her name? Nora's voice broke. What did they call my daughter? Elise, Martha whispered, just like you wanted. If you're still watching, if your heart is pounding in your chest right now, if you can feel Nora's rage and grief and desperate hope, I need you to do something. Share this video right now. Post it. Send it to someone. Because what happens next, the way Nora takes back everything that was stolen from her, is going to restore your faith in justice. Subscribe to KBR Romance. Nora spent 3 months verifying every piece of information Martha had given her. 3 months of hiring private investigators who specialized in international adoptions. 3 months of tracking down medical personnel who had been paid to disappear. 3 months of following paper trails that led through shell corporations and offshore accounts, all funded by Beatrice Thorne's bottomless fortune. And every single thing Martha had told her was true. Martha herself passed away 6 weeks after their meeting at the pier. Nora attended the small funeral, standing in the back, watching as the woman who had pushed her down the stairs was lowered into the ground. She felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice, just a hollow recognition that Martha had carried her guilt to the very end. But Martha's confession had given Nora something more valuable than revenge. It had given her the truth. The Aubrey family lived in Geneva in a beautiful home overlooking Lake Leman. Friedrich Aubrey was a banker. His wife Elise was a former concert pianist. They were kind people, educated people, who had desperately wanted children and believed they were giving a home to an orphaned baby boy. They had named him Julian. Nora's private investigator sent her photographs, video footage from a distance, school records that showed a bright, curious child who loved science and asked questions about everything. A boy who was loved and cared for and had no idea his entire existence was built on a lie. Finding her daughter was harder. The boarding school in Connecticut was exclusive, expensive, and fiercely protective of its students' privacy. But money, Nora had learned, could open almost any door, and she had plenty of money now. The girl was enrolled under the name Elise Hartley. Orphaned, the record said. Parents died in a car accident. Tuition paid in full by a private trust. More lies. Nora watched her daughter from across a parking lot one Saturday afternoon, hidden behind tinted windows of a rented car. The girl was 7 years old, tall for her age, with dark curls that caught the sunlight and gray eyes that were pure Silas. But when she smiled at something her friend said, it was Nora's smile looking back at her. Nora sat in that car and cried until she had no tears left. Her children were alive, both of them. Growing up hundreds of miles apart, neither one knowing the other existed, neither one knowing that their mother had spent 7 years grieving them. And Beatrice Thorne had orchestrated all of it. Nora could have gone to the authorities. She had the evidence now. Medical records proving the twins had been born alive. Wire transfers showing the payments to Martha and the adoption agency. Testimony from medical staff who had been paid to falsify documents. She could have had Beatrice arrested quietly, fought the custody battle through the courts, brought her children home without any public spectacle. But that wasn't enough. Beatrice Thorne had destroyed her publicly, had stood in a church and allowed Silas to call her a murderer in front of society's elite, had let the world believe that Nora Calloway was a monster who killed her own babies. If Nora was going to take back what was stolen from her, she needed witnesses. She needed the same people who had condemned her to see the truth. The annual Thorne Foundation Gala was 3 weeks away. Nora made a phone call to an old contact from her ArcLight days, someone who owed her a favor. 2 days later, an invitation arrived at her office. Ms. Nora Marrow and guests. Nora held the embossed card in her hands and smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a kind smile. The next step was the hardest thing she'd ever done. She flew to Geneva and knocked on the Aubrey's door. Friedrich answered, his face going pale when she introduced herself. "My name is Nora Marrow. I believe you know me by my former name, Nora Calloway. I'm Julian's biological mother." For a moment, she thought he might close the door in her face. But then Elise appeared behind him, and something in the older woman's expression shifted from fear to understanding. "Please, come in." They sat in a beautiful living room filled with afternoon light and family photographs. Julian's face smiled at her from a dozen frames. Her son, alive and loved, and completely unaware that his world was about to change. "We had no idea." Elise's hands trembled as she poured tea she didn't drink. "The agency showed us death certificates. They said you died during childbirth. They said the father wanted nothing to do with the baby." "I know." Nora kept her voice steady. "You were victims of this too." Friedrich leaned forward. "What do you want from us?" Nora looked at the photographs of Julian again, at the life these people had given her son when she couldn't. "I want to tell you the truth, all of it, and then I want you to help me bring him home." She explained everything. The marriage, Beatrice's hatred, the fall, the accusations, Martha's confession, the evidence she had gathered, the daughter she had also lost and found. By the time she finished, Elise was crying. That poor child. That poor, poor child. "Children," Nora corrected gently. "Julian has a twin sister. They don't know about each other yet." Friedrich stood and walked to the window, his back rigid with barely contained emotion. "We love him." His voice was rough. "We've raised him as our own for 7 years. The thought of losing him." "I know," Nora's own voice broke. "And I'm not asking you to disappear from his life. You've been his parents when I couldn't be. That matters. That will always matter. Then what are you asking? Help me expose the woman who did this. Come to New York. Bring Julian. Let the world see what Beatrice Thorne is capable of. And then," she paused, "then we'll figure out custody arrangements that honor what you've given him while letting me be his mother." Elise looked at her husband. Some wordless communication passed between them. "He deserves to know the truth," she said finally. "He deserves to know his real mother. And his sister." Friedrich nodded slowly. We'll come. Getting Elise out of the Connecticut boarding school was simpler. Nora was listed on the birth certificate that had been sealed with the adoption records. With Martha's evidence proving the adoption was fraudulent, Nora had legal standing. She showed up at the school with lawyers and court orders and a heart that was beating so hard she thought it might explode. The headmistress was coldly professional until she saw the documentation. This is highly irregular. This is kidnapping. Nora's voice was ice. That child was stolen from me 7 years ago. I have evidence of fraud, falsified documents, and conspiracy. You can either release her to me now, or you can explain to the police why you've been holding a kidnapped child. The headmistress made a phone call. Nora knew exactly who she was calling. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Beatrice's voice was pure venom. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking back my daughter. She's not your daughter anymore. You lost that right when you killed. My children are alive, Beatrice. Both of them. And in 2 weeks, the entire world is going to know what you did. Silence on the other end. Then, if you think you can destroy this family, I don't want to destroy the family. Nora's smile was sharp. I just want to destroy you. She hung up. An hour later, she met her daughter for the first time in 7 years. Elise stood in the headmistress's office, a small figure with dark curls and wary eyes. She clutched a worn backpack and looked at Nora with confusion and fear. Who are you? Nora knelt down so they were at eye level. My name is Nora. She swallowed hard. I'm your mother. The girl's eyes widened. My mother is dead. That's what they told me. They lied to you, sweetheart. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Elise studied her face with unnerving intensity. You have the same eyes as me. Yes, I do. And the same nose. Yes. The girl was quiet for a long moment. Are you going to take me away from here? Yes. If that's okay with you. Elise looked around the office, at the headmistress who wouldn't meet her gaze, at the lawyers standing nearby, at Nora kneeling in front of her. Will you tell me the truth? About everything? I promise. Okay. The girl shouldered her backpack. Let's go. In the car, Elise asked questions without stopping. Where have you been? Why did people say you were dead? Do I have a father? Where are we going? What happens now? Nora answered every question as honestly as she could for a 7-year-old. When she told Elise about Julian, about the twin brother she didn't know existed, the girl went very still. I have a brother? Yes. And we're going to meet him? Yes, very soon. Elise processed this silently for several miles. Then, the people at school said my parents didn't want me. That's why I was alone. That was never true. Nora's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I wanted you more than anything in the world. Someone very bad took you away from me. But I found you, and I'm never letting you go again. Promise? Promise. The gala was 2 weeks away. Nora used that time to prepare Elise and Julian for what was coming. The Aubreys flew to New York and stayed in a hotel suite. Nora brought Elise to meet them. The moment the twins saw each other was something Nora would remember for the rest of her life. They stood in the hotel living room, 2 7-year-olds studying each other with identical expressions of wonder and disbelief. Julian spoke first. You look like me. You look like me. Elise countered. I'm your brother. I'm your sister. And then they smiled, the exact same smile, and something broken inside Nora began to heal. Over the next 2 weeks, she told them everything in age-appropriate terms. There was a woman who did a bad thing. She took you away from me when you were babies. She told everyone you died. But you didn't die. You've been alive this whole time. And now I found you. Julian, who loved facts and evidence, asked logical questions. Where was the woman now? Would she go to jail? What would happen next? Elise, who was more emotional, asked different questions. Did you cry for us? Did you miss us? Do you love us? Every day, Nora told her. Every single day I cried and missed you and loved you. Do you love us now? More than anything in the world. Nora also prepared them for the gala. Your father is going to be there. He doesn't know you're alive. When he sees you, it's going to be a big shock. Julian frowned. Why doesn't he know? Because the bad woman lied to him too. She made him believe something that wasn't true. Will he be happy to see us? I don't know. Nora answered honestly. I hope so. The dress Nora designed for the gala was midnight black silk, elegant and architectural, with clean lines that made her look like exactly what she was. A woman who had built an empire from nothing. A woman who had survived what should have destroyed her. A woman who was about to reclaim everything that had been stolen. She dressed Julian in a tailored black suit. Elise wore a dress of soft gold that Nora had sewn herself, every stitch an act of love. The Aubreys would attend as well, moral support and witnesses to the truth. On the night of the gala, Nora stood in her penthouse and looked at her children. "Are you ready?" Julian nodded seriously. Elise took her hand. "We're ready." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over women in designer gowns and men in custom tuxedos. An orchestra played softly in the corner. Champagne flowed freely. Society's elite mingled and networked and performed the elaborate dance of maintaining status. Silas Thorne stood near the stage, the guest of honor, accepting congratulations for the Foundation's latest charitable initiative. At 40, he was still handsome, though there was gray at his temples now and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 7 years ago. He looked successful, powerful, untouchable. Beatrice sat at the head table, silver hair perfect, diamond necklace catching the light, presiding over her kingdom with the satisfaction of someone who had won every battle. Neither of them saw Nora enter, but everyone else did. The moment she stepped into the ballroom, holding the hands of 2 children, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. Nora walked forward slowly, her heels clicking against marble, her children close beside her. The orchestra faltered and went silent. Society photographers, there to document the event, swiveled their cameras in her direction. She stopped 10 feet from Silas. He had turned at the commotion, his champagne flute halfway to his lips. His eyes found her face first, and she saw the moment of recognition, the confusion, the shock of seeing someone who had disappeared from his world 7 years ago. Then his gaze dropped to the children. His face went from tan to gray, to deathly pale in the space of a heartbeat. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. "Hello, Silas." Nora's voice was calm, clear, designed to carry. "It's been 7 years." Silas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Julian, then at Elise, then back at Nora. His chest heaved like he couldn't get enough air. "Nora." His voice was barely a whisper. "Who? What? You criticized me for the death of our son." Nora spoke clearly, every word enunciated for the audience of hundreds watching. "You called me a murderer in front of these people. You told the world I killed baby boy Thorne because I was too stubborn to follow doctor's orders." She paused, letting the words land. "You stood in a church and destroyed my reputation while your mother sat beside you and said nothing." The crowd was utterly silent now. Even the staff had stopped moving. "But our son didn't die, Silas." She placed her hand on Julian's shoulder. "This is Julian. He's 7 years old. He loves science and asks questions about everything. He's been living in Switzerland with a family who thought they were adopting an orphan." Silas made a sound like he'd been struck. "And this," Nora's hand moved to Elise's shoulder, "is Elise, your daughter, the twin sister you never knew existed. She's been hidden in a boarding school in Connecticut for 7 years under a false name." "No." The word came out as a broken whisper. "No, that's not possible. It's not only possible, it's true." Nora pulled a USB drive from her clutch and held it up. "I have medical records proving they were born alive via emergency C-section. I have wire transfers showing $5 million paid to the nurse who pushed me down the stairs and falsified the death certificates. I have adoption documents, photographs, and a signed confession from that nurse before she died." She looked directly at Beatrice, whose face had gone as white as her pearls. "I have proof that your mother orchestrated everything." The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Phones came out. People started recording. Silas turned to his mother, his expression shattered. "Mother?" Beatrice stood slowly, her composure cracking like porcelain under pressure. "Silas, don't listen to her. She's delusional. She's been obsessed with you for years. This is some elaborate scheme. I have the medical team on record." Nora's voice cut through Beatrice's lies like a blade. "The doctors who delivered my babies alive and handed them over to your mother's contacts. I have the adoption agency that processed fraudulent paperwork. I have bank statements showing payments from Beatrice Thorne's private accounts." She gestured to the crowd. and I've already sent copies to every major news outlet in the country. By tomorrow morning, the world will know that Beatrice Thorne paid millions to steal her own grandchildren and destroy her son's wife. Beatrice's mask shattered completely. She was a foster child. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. She came from nothing. She didn't deserve the Thorne name. I did what was necessary to protect this family from contamination. Contamination. Nora repeated the word. You called your own grandchildren contamination. They were tainted by your blood. The crowd recoiled. Several people gasped. Phones captured every word. Silas staggered backward like he'd been physically struck. You told me they were dead. His voice was raw, broken. You showed me death certificates, autopsy reports. You let me believe. His voice cracked completely. You let me believe Nora killed our children. She did kill them. Beatrice's composure was gone now, replaced by something ugly and desperate. She killed the future of this family when she trapped you with a pregnancy. I simply corrected her mistake. Silas turned to Nora, tears streaming down his face. Nora, He couldn't finish. His gaze dropped to Julian and Elise, and he fell to his knees. I'm so sorry. The words came out as a sob. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Nora felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just the cold clarity of someone who had already grieved this man and moved on. Don't apologize to me. She kept her voice level. Apologize to your children, the ones you mourned at a funeral while they were alive and being raised by strangers. I didn't know. Silas was openly weeping now. I swear I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't believe me. Nora's words were surgical, precise. I told you someone pushed me. I told you I felt hands on my back. I begged you to investigate. And you chose to believe your mother instead. She knelt down between Julian and Elise, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. These are your children, Silas. Julian and Elise Thorne. They've spent 7 years being raised by people who love them, because you threw away the woman who would have died to protect them. Silas reached toward them with shaking hands. Please. No. Nora stood, pulling her children close. You don't get to touch them. You don't get to cry and expect immediate forgiveness. You destroyed me. You threw me into the street with nothing. You used your power and your money to make sure I could never work again, never recover, never escape what you did to me. She looked at him with cold, clear eyes. I want full custody. I want a formal public statement acknowledging what your mother did and exonerating me of every accusation. I want every lie corrected in every publication that printed them. And I want you to stay out of our lives until you've earned the right to be called their father. She turned to walk away. Nora, please. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Please what, Silas? Please forget that you called me a murderer? Please pretend you didn't abandon me when I was broken in a hospital bed? Please give you a chance you never gave me. I'll do anything. His voice was desperate. Anything. Everything. I'll give you my entire fortune. I'll sign over custody immediately. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. You can't make this right. Nora finally looked back at him. You can only try to be better. For them. She nodded to the children. If you want to be their father, prove it. Go to therapy. Face what you did. Become someone who would have believed me instead of betraying me. And maybe, in a few years, I'll let you try. With that, she walked toward the exit, Julian and Elise beside her, the Aubreys following close behind. Behind her, FBI agents entered the ballroom. Nora had arranged that too. Beatrice Thorne. One of them announced, "You're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsifying official documents." The last thing Nora heard before the doors closed was Beatrice screaming about family loyalty, and Silas sobbing on the floor of the ballroom, where he'd once been untouchable. Justice, Nora thought, wasn't always satisfying, but it was necessary. If this moment gave you chills, if you felt that vindication in your bones, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button, share this video, and drop a comment telling me what you would do in Nora's position. Because we're not done yet. The most powerful part of this story is what happens next. My friends, before we see the final chapter of Nora and Silas's story, I want you to stop and reflect with me for just a moment. This story isn't just about betrayal or stolen children or a billionaire's downfall. It's about something much deeper. It's about who we choose to believe when the pressure is on. Silas Thorne had a choice. When Nora lay broken in that hospital bed, when she told him she was pushed, when she begged him to believe her, he had a choice. He could have chosen the woman he promised to love and protect. He could have investigated. He could have fought for her. But he chose the easy narrative. He chose his mother's lie because grief made him weak, and weak people blame others for their pain. Here's what I need you to understand. Character is revealed in crisis, not in comfort. Anybody can love you when life is easy. Anybody can stand beside you when the sun is shining. But the people who truly love you, they believe in you when the whole world is calling you a liar. They fight for you when the evidence is stacked against you. They choose you even when it costs them something. Silas failed that test, and it cost him 7 years with his children and the love of the only woman who ever saw him as more than his bank account. But here's the beauty of Nora's story. She didn't need him to believe her to rebuild her life. She didn't wait for an apology or validation. She didn't crumble under the weight of injustice. She got up, she worked, she transformed, and she built an empire from the ashes of her destroyed reputation. That is the power of a woman who refuses to let someone else's lies define her truth. So let me ask you, who are you believing right now? And who is believing in you? If you're in a season where people have turned on you, where your name is being dragged, where the truth feels buried under a mountain of lies, hold on. Your vindication is coming. Not because you're screaming for it, but because truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. And if you're the one who failed to believe someone you love, there's still time to make it right. But it starts with humility. It starts with saying, I was wrong. I didn't protect you when I should have, and I want to earn back what I destroyed. Let me pray for you right now. Father, I lift up every person watching this story today. Some of them are Nora's, falsely accused, abandoned, rebuilding from nothing. Give them strength. Give them resilience. Give them the vision to see that their current chapter is not their final story. Some of them are Silas's, men and women who made a terrible choice, who believed a lie, who broke someone they loved. Give them the courage to face their mistakes and the humility to do the work of earning back trust. Protect the innocent. Expose the deceitful. And let justice roll down like a river. In your name. Amen. Now let's see how this story ends. The media firestorm was immediate and relentless. By sunrise the next morning, Beatrice Thorne's arrest was headline news on every major outlet. The stolen twins of billionaire Silas Thorne. Tech mogul's mother arrested for kidnapping conspiracy. 7-year cover-up exposed in shocking gala confrontation. Nora's phone rang non-stop with interview requests. She ignored all of them. Her lawyer released a single statement. Nora Marrow, formerly Nora Thorne, has been reunited with her children after 7 years of believing them deceased. She asks for privacy as her family heals from this trauma. All questions regarding the criminal case should be directed to federal prosecutors. Beatrice's trial took 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical personnel testified about the staged death certificates. The adoption agency's records were subpoenaed. Bank statements showed millions in suspicious transfers. Martha's deathbed confession was entered into evidence. Beatrice Thorne was convicted on 12 counts including kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Silas attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back, watching his mother's empire crumble. When the verdict was read, he showed no emotion, but those who looked closely saw tears streaming silently down his face. Custody proceedings were simpler. Nora was granted full legal and physical custody of Julian and Elise. The Aubreys were given visitation rights and officially recognized as the children's family. Silas was granted supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation and family therapy. Nora moved the twins into her penthouse. She converted her home office and guest room into bedrooms, letting Julian and Elise choose their own colors and decorations. She enrolled them in the same private school. She rearranged her work schedule to be available for pickup and homework, and all the ordinary parenting tasks she had missed. The adjustment was harder than she expected. These weren't the babies she had dreamed of raising. They were 7-year-old people with their own personalities and histories and trauma from learning their entire lives had been built on lies. Julian had nightmares about being taken away again. Elise was clingy and asked constantly if Nora was really staying. Both of them were in therapy twice a week, processing abandonment and identity, and the confusing reality of having multiple sets of parents. Nora was in therapy too. She had her own trauma to process. 7 years of grief. 7 years of being called a murderer. 7 years of building a life on the foundation of devastating loss, only to discover it had all been orchestrated. And then there was Silas. For the first 6 months after the gala, Nora heard nothing from him directly. His lawyers handled all custody communications. Financial support appeared in her account without comment. He didn't ask for anything. Then, 8 months after that night at the plaza, her assistant buzzed through. "Miss Marrow, there's a Silas Thorne here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's about the children. Tell him I'm busy. He said he'll wait." Nora found him in her reception area 2 hours later, still sitting in the same chair, his expensive suit rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. "You said you'd wait." She stood in the doorway. "I didn't think you meant it literally. I told you I'd do anything." He stood slowly. "That includes waiting." "What do you want, Silas?" "To give you this." He handed her a folder. Inside were court documents, signed statements, a complete transfer of all financial assets related to the children's future, education trusts, medical coverage, property deeds. "I'm not trying to buy forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm trying to make sure they never want for anything, regardless of what happens between us." Nora flipped through the documents. It was millions of dollars, transferred without conditions. Why? Because they're my children. And I failed them once. I won't fail them again by being cheap or controlling or using money as leverage. She looked at him. Really looked. He was thinner than she remembered. Older. There was a brokenness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You look terrible. I've been in therapy 4 times a week, individual and group, processing what I did, what I believed, how I weaponized my grief against the person I should have protected. Good. I've stepped back from Harrington Global. I'm consulting part-time. The rest of my schedule is clear for whenever." He paused. "Whenever you decide I can see them." The supervised visitations went well. That's what the court monitor said. They did. Julian asked me about quantum physics. Elise wanted to know if I liked the same foods as her. Nora felt something crack in her chest, something she'd been protecting for 7 years. "They want to know you," she said finally. "I won't keep you from them out of spite. But you have to earn their trust, Silas. You have to show up consistently. You have to do the work." "I will. I am. And what about me? What about you?" Nora crossed her arms. "Do you want to earn my trust too? Or just theirs?" Silas looked at her for a long moment. "I want everything I destroyed, but I don't deserve it. So I'll take whatever you're willing to give and be grateful." That was 8 months ago. Now, 2 years after the gala, Nora sat in her expanded penthouse watching Julian and Elise do homework at the kitchen island. They were 9 now, growing into themselves, still healing but visibly happier. The doorbell rang. Nora opened it to find Silas standing in the hallway with takeout bags from the Italian place in Brooklyn, the same restaurant from their first date a lifetime ago. "You said Thursday dinners were okay now." He said it like a question. She stepped aside to let him in. The children looked up when he entered, and their faces lit up in a way that made Nora's heart hurt. "Dad." Elise ran to hug him. The words still sounded new, tentative, but real. Over dinner, they talked about school projects and upcoming field trips and whether the universe was finite or infinite. Silas listened with genuine attention, asking follow-up questions, remembering details from previous conversations. After the kids went to do their reading, Nora and Silas cleaned up together in companionable silence. "Thank you for this," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of their lives. You're their father." She rinsed a plate. "You made terrible choices, but you're doing the work to be better. That matters. And you?" He turned to look at her. "Is there any chance someday that I could earn my way back into your life? Not as their father. As—" He couldn't finish. "As what, Silas?" "As the man you trusted once, before I broke that trust in the worst way possible." Nora dried her hands slowly. "I don't know. Honest answer? I don't know if I can ever love you the way I did before. That Nora died 7 years ago. I know. But," she paused, "I might be able to love you differently. The way 2 people who survived something terrible love each other. Carefully. With boundaries. With eyes wide open. I'll take it." His voice was rough. "Whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it. Then keep showing up. Keep being consistent. Keep proving that you've changed. Not for me. For them. For yourself. And if I do, then Maybe we'll see. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a promise. But it was possibility. 1 year later, on what would have been their 10th wedding anniversary, Nora woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten letter on simple paper. No expensive stationery, no pretense. Nora, 10 years ago today, I married the love of my life. I stood at an altar and promised to love you, honor you, protect you through everything. I broke those promises in the worst possible way. I let grief turn me into someone I don't recognize. I hurt you when I should have held you. I blamed you when I should have believed you. I threw you away when I should have fought for you. I can't undo those mistakes. I can't give you back the 7 years we lost. But I can tell you this, the man who destroyed you no longer exists. I've spent every day since learning the truth trying to become someone who deserves even a fraction of your forgiveness. I don't expect you to forget. I don't expect you to trust me immediately. But if you're willing, I would like to spend the rest of my life earning back what I threw away. Not because I want to recapture the past, but because I want to build something better, something stronger, something based on honesty and growth, and the knowledge that true love means believing in each other, even when the world says otherwise. I love you. I have always loved you. And I will wait as long as it takes for you to decide if you can love me again. Yours, if you'll have me. Silas. Nora read the letter 3 times. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who believed love conquered all, the one who had been so thoroughly broken that she thought she would never believe in anything again. Then she thought about the woman she had become, stronger, wiser, more careful with her heart, and she thought about the possibility of choosing love again. Not the naive love of her youth, but the complicated, scarred, hard-won love of 2 people who had survived the worst and were still willing to try. She called Silas. Meet me at the rooftop garden, the one where you proposed the first time. I'll be there. The rooftop garden looked exactly as she remembered. String lights hanging between potted trees. A view of Manhattan that made the city look like a constellation of possibilities. The same bench where Silas had gotten down on one knee a lifetime ago. He was already there when she arrived, nervous energy radiating from every line of his body. Thank you for coming. Nora sat on the bench and he sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. I read your letter. And I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness, about what it means and what it doesn't mean. She looked out at the city lights. Forgiving you doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't make the pain go away. It doesn't mean I forget the words you said, or the things you did. I know. But it means I'm choosing not to let what you did define the rest of my life. She turned to face him. I've spent 7 years being the woman you destroyed, building myself back up, proving I could survive without you. And I did survive. I thrived. She took a shaky breath. But I'm tired of letting your mistakes control my story. I want to write a new story. One where I'm not running from the past but building toward a future. What kind of future? I don't know yet. But maybe one where I'm willing to see if the man sitting next to me is actually as different as he claims to be. Silas felt hope bloom in his chest for the first time in years. What do you need from me? Time, patience, absolute honesty. No more secrets. No more letting other people influence what you believe about me. If we do this, we do it as equals who choose each other every single day. I can do that. And therapy. Nora's voice was firm. Both of us, individually and together. We need help processing what happened. We need tools to communicate better. We need to do this right. Not like before. Silas finished. Like people who have learned from their mistakes. Exactly. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Nora Marrow, will you give me a chance to earn back your trust? Not as the man I was, but as the man I'm becoming? She looked at their intertwined fingers. His hand was older now, marked with the passage of time, but his grip was gentle, respectful, the grip of someone who understood how precious second chances were. Yes, the word came out as a whisper. Yes, I'll give you a chance. One chance, Silas. Don't waste it. I won't. I swear on everything I am. I will not waste this. They sat together on that bench as the city glittered around them, 2 broken people choosing to believe in the possibility of healing. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was a beginning built on truth instead of illusion, on growth instead of perfection. on the hard-won knowledge that love wasn't about never failing, but about choosing to try again after failure. The next year was a careful dance of rebuilding. Silas and Nora dated like people learning each other for the first time. Coffee dates while the kids were at school. Long walks through Central Park where they talked about everything and nothing. Couples therapy sessions where they unpacked 7 years of pain and misunderstanding. They made rules about communication and boundaries and what they needed to feel safe with each other, and slowly, carefully, they began to build something new. Not a recreation of their first marriage, but something stronger. Something forged in fire and loss and the determination to do better. Julian and Elise watched their parents fall in love again with the wisdom of children who understood that nothing was simple. One evening at dinner, Julian looked between his parents. "Are you two dating?" Nora and Silas exchanged glances. "Yes," Nora said carefully. "We're seeing if we can build something healthy together." "Does that mean you'll get married again?" "Maybe. Someday. If we both decide it's right." Elise frowned. "But what if it doesn't work? What if you fight again?" "Then we'll handle it better than we did before," Silas said quietly. "We'll communicate. We'll go to therapy. We'll choose each other instead of letting other people drive us apart. And we'll never, ever let anything come between us and you two." Nora added, "Whatever happens between your father and me, we're both committed to being good parents to you." The children considered this. "Okay," Julian said finally, "but if you do get married, can we be in the wedding?" "Absolutely." 1 year and 8 months after Silas walked into Nora's office with that folder of documents, he proposed again. Same rooftop garden, same view of Manhattan, but everything else was different. Nora Marrow. He knelt on one knee, his eyes full of tears and hope. "I asked you to marry me once before, and I failed to honor the promises I made to you. I don't expect you to forget that, but I'm asking you to believe that I've learned from those failures. This time, I know what I'm promising. I'm promising to believe in you always, even when the world says otherwise. I'm promising to communicate instead of assuming. I'm promising to build a partnership based on equality and respect and the hard work of choosing each other every single day. I'm promising to be the husband you deserve, the father our children need, and the man I should have been all along. Will you marry me again?" "For real this time?" Nora looked at the ring he held. It wasn't the ostentatious diamond from their first engagement. It was simpler, more personal. A band of gold with 3 small stones representing Julie and Elise and the love they had rebuilt together. She thought about the girl who had said yes the first time, young and hopeful and believing that love was enough. Then she thought about the woman she was now, scarred and strong and wise enough to know that love was work she was willing to do. "Yes," she smiled through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you again. For real this time." Their second wedding was nothing like the first. No massive society spectacle. No guest list full of people who didn't care about them. No expensive venue chosen to impress the right families. Instead, they married in the backyard garden of Nora's penthouse, surrounded by a small group of people who had supported them through the darkness. Julian and Elise stood with them as joint attendants, beaming with pride. The Aubreys attended via video call from Switzerland, wiping away tears. A handful of close friends and the therapist who had helped them rebuild filled the small space. When Silas spoke his vows, his voice was clear and sure. "I promise to love you when it's easy and when it's hard. I promise to believe in you when doubt creeps in. I promise to be your partner in building a life that honors both of us. I promise to be the man our children can be proud of. I promise to never, ever take your love for granted again." Nora's vows were equally powerful. "I promise to trust you while also trusting myself. I promise to communicate my needs instead of expecting you to guess. I promise to remember that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. I promise to build a future that acknowledges our past without being defined by it. I promise to love you. Not perfectly, but honestly." When they kissed, Julian and Elise cheered so loudly the neighbors could hear, and for the first time in years, Nora felt complete. Not because Silas had saved her. She had saved herself. But because she had chosen to share her life with someone who finally understood how precious that choice was. 5 years later, the Thorne household was beautiful chaos. Julian at 14 was already talking about MIT and quantum computing. Elise at 14 was selling her artwork online and planning a gallery show. They bickered like normal siblings and protected each other fiercely. Silas had fully stepped back from Thorne Global to focus on family, taking a consultant role that allowed him to be present for breakfast and homework and bedtime conversations. Nora had expanded Marrow and Gold into a global brand focused on sustainable fashion and empowering women from difficult backgrounds to enter the industry. Together they had built something that looked nothing like their first marriage and everything like a real partnership. They still went to therapy. They still had hard conversations. They still worked through moments when the past threatened to overwhelm the present, but they did it together. One evening, Silas found Nora in her home studio sketching designs. "You look happy." She looked up and smiled. "I am happy, even with all the chaos, all the noise, all the stress of running a company and raising teenagers. Especially because of all that, because it means I'm living instead of just surviving." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "Do you ever regret giving me a second chance?" She considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd walked away, if I'd kept my walls up and protected myself from ever being hurt again." She squeezed his hand. "And I think that version of me would have been safe, but she wouldn't have been whole. You make me whole, not because I need you to complete me, but because loving you, choosing to trust you again, made me braver than I ever thought possible." Silas kissed her forehead. "I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that bravery. I know. And that's why I'm not afraid anymore." Friends, if this story moved you, if it reminded you that justice is real, that truth surfaces, and that broken people can rebuild into something unbreakable, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the KBR Romance family. Every week I bring you stories that don't just entertain, they transform. They remind you that your pain has purpose, your struggle has meaning, and your comeback is already being written. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you forgive someone like Silas? Or is some betrayal too deep to come back from? I read every single comment. Your story matters to me. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, someone who's rebuilding, someone who's been falsely accused, someone who's fighting for their truth, share this video with them. You might just change their life. Now let me tell you the moral of this story, because if you've watched this far, you deserve to understand what this journey was really about. This story isn't about a perfect love that conquered all. It's about imperfect people who chose to fight for each other even when the odds seemed impossible. It's about a woman who refused to let tragedy define her, who rebuilt herself from nothing and became more powerful than anyone who tried to destroy her. It's about a man who made unforgivable mistakes, but did the work to become someone worthy of forgiveness. It's about children who deserved better and got the family they needed because two broken people chose healing over bitterness. The truth is that life will break you. People will fail you. Love will hurt you in ways you never imagined possible. But here's what I want you to understand. You get to choose what happens next. You can let the breaking destroy you, or you can use it to rebuild yourself into something stronger. You can hold on to anger and protect yourself from ever being vulnerable again, or you can choose the terrifying, beautiful path of forgiveness. Not because the people who hurt you deserve it, but because you deserve to be free. Nora could have stayed bitter. She would have been justified. Silas destroyed her in ways that some people never recover from. But she chose differently. She chose to survive, to thrive, to build an empire from her ashes. And when the opportunity came to forgive, she chose that too. Not immediately, not easily, but deliberately, with boundaries and conditions and the wisdom to know that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about refusing to let the past control your future. And Silas chose the harder path. He chose to actually change, not just apologize, but transform. Not just say he was different, but prove it through consistent action over years. That's what real redemption looks like. Not a grand gesture, but 1,000 small choices to be better. If you're watching this and you're the one who was hurt, I want you to know that you don't owe anyone forgiveness. You don't have to give second chances. You have every right to protect yourself and walk away. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to try again, do it on your terms, with boundaries, with support, with the understanding that forgiveness is a process, not a moment. And if you're watching this and you're the one who caused the harm, understand this. Apologies are not enough. Guilt is not enough. You have to actually change. You have to do the work of becoming someone different, someone worthy of the trust you destroyed. And even then, the person you hurt might not choose you. And that is their right. This story had a hopeful ending because both people chose the hard work of healing. Because Nora was brave enough to risk her heart again. Because Silas was humble enough to earn back what he threw away. because they both understood that love is not a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. So I'm asking you now, what choice are you going to make? Are you going to let your past define your future? Or are you going to write a new story? One where you're not the victim or the villain, but the hero who chose to heal. Remember, you are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you choose to do next. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose love. This is Dennis, reminding you that your story isn't over. The best chapters are still ahead. Subscribe to KBR Romance so you don't miss the next story. Comment below and share your thoughts. And remember, someone out there needs to hear this today. Be blessed, and I'll see you in the next one.